Hi everyone, welcome back. No voiceovers, no dialogues, only silence, and the choices it hides. In a world shrouded in shadows, where schemes seep into every breath, there are moments that seem ordinary yet conceal an approaching storm. This story does not begin by chance, but through long days of mounting pressure, where each fate is bound by unspoken secrets. On their path of escape, Tu Tieu and Tuan face not only the darkness of their enemies, but the shadows hidden deep within themselves. Every step they take is heavy, burdened with both hope and dread. The whistling wind through cracks, the hurried echoes of footsteps, all merge into a tense score for a journey without certainty. Here, friendship, trust, and sacrifice are no longer distant ideals. They are fragile threads, keeping them from plunging into the abyss. And when the truth is suddenly revealed, nothing will remain the same. The night seems only to consume, yet sometimes from that very night, the smallest flicker of light emerges, guiding the lost. This is a journey of confrontation, of costly choices, and of an unyielding belief that even in the deepest darkness, there remains a glimmer of hope. Dawn spread across the mountainside, soft golden light breaking through the leaves, casting sparkles on coffee plants still beaded with morning dew. Tu Tieu walked slowly, her breath heavy, body still recovering from days of exhaustion. Beside her, Tuan bent low, her hands quick and steady, plucking the ripe red cherries. Silence hung in the air, broken only by distant bird calls and the faint rustle of wind through branches. Each step Tu Tieu took seemed burdened, not by the basket she carried, but by the weight of memories still unsettled. Her heart tightened as she glanced at her sister's peaceful smile. A smile she secretly feared could be swept away by storms yet unseen. And yet, her grip on the basket's handle grew firmer, as though reminding herself that surrender was never an option. Above them, the pale sky slowly burst into brilliance, yet in Tu Tieu's eyes lingered a haze, a mixture of hope and dread. She inhaled deeply, drawing in the raw scent of soil and the bitter green of coffee leaves, grounding herself in the fleeting truth of this fragile calm. In the vast highlands, such an ordinary moment became her anchor, a fragile thread holding her steady for the storms waiting beyond the horizon. Evening descended, the last traces of sunlight painting a faint streak of amber across the weathered wooden wall. Tuan gathered the coffee baskets, her fragile frame flickering in the dim glow. Tu Tieu stood by the doorframe, eyes drifting toward the forest, where darkness had thickened, swallowing every empty space. In the stillness, unease crept in, sharp and silent, as though unseen eyes were fixed upon her from behind. Every falling leaf, every rustle of the wind seemed to tighten her chest. Her gaze caught the dusty glass of the window, reflecting her own face, weary, etched with lines of worry. Tuan gently placed a hand on her shoulder, yet even that familiar warmth could not dispel the chill settling in Tu Tieu's heart. The shadows outside did not merely press against the house. They seeped inward, entangled with memories she had yet to confront. Something remained hidden, like an invisible rope tightening with each breath she took. When night finally claimed the sky, the oil lamp flickered unsteadily, its glow fragile against the draft that slipped through the cracks. In that trembling light, Tu Tieu shivered. She knew the calm around her was nothing more than a thin veil, ready to tear at any moment, exposing the abyss of fear that waited, silent and patient, just beyond. Night fell, and a heavy mist shrouded the yard, swallowing every path into obscurity. The steady hum of insects mingled with the wind rushing through the old thatched roof, forming a haunting rhythm, like an omen of danger waiting to surface. Tuan sat at the wooden table, fingers entwined tightly, her gaze drifting as if searching for a safe anchor in the darkness. Tu Tieu lingered by the doorframe, her slight shoulders trembling beneath the cold drafts. Within her, a vague premonition sharpened. Something was wrong. A hidden shift in the night pressed closer, as though fate itself was preparing to strike them once more. Memories once buried, moments when she had nearly lost everything, surged back, slicing through her thoughts like the shards of glass. From afar, heavy footsteps echoed, halting, then resuming, slow, deliberate, undeniable. Tuan lifted her head, eyes wide, panic seeking Tu Tieu's. No words passed between them, yet a single glance was enough. The night's silence was not stillness, but a warning made flesh. The oil lamp swayed, its fragile glow flickering across the wall, casting warped silhouettes that crept like advancing figures. In that trembling light, Tu Tieu tightened her fist, bracing herself for what she knew could no longer be avoided. In the mist-drenched courtyard, footsteps grew sharper, pounding like a relentless drumbeat against the chest. Each sound thickened the air, pressing down with suffocating weight. Tuan sat frozen, her eyes glistening with fear, fingers digging into the wooden table's edge until her skin blanched. Tu Tieu descended the steps slowly, her gaze taut, scanning for a shadow hidden in the haze. She could feel the presence drawing closer, each step narrowing the fragile gap between safety and the abyss. Her heart raced, but her legs held steady, for she knew retreat meant losing everything. A vague figure emerged, tall, heavy, advancing with the slow certainty of a predator savoring its prey. Tuan trembled, biting her lip until it bled, her desperate eyes seeking Tu Tieu's as though begging for a spark of hope. Suddenly, the wind surged, whipping the curtain at the porch, revealing a hollow void. The shadow froze there, looming, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Silence engulfed the space, terrifying in its depth. Only the sound of pounding hearts and ragged breaths broke through. In that suspended moment, Tu Tieu clenched her fist, a fierce light igniting in her eyes. Darkness could close in from every side, yet she was ready to face it, no matter who or what stood before her. The darkness slowly receded, unveiling a chillingly bleak scene. Tu Tieu took another step forward, her breath trembling faintly, though her eyes remained unyielding. Before her, the shadow was no longer a mirage within the mist, but a living presence, its thread as sharp and heavy as a blade against the throat. Tuan curled inward, trembling uncontrollably. Each heartbeat resounded like clashing metal in the stillness. She knew there was no escape. Every path was locked, and her only hope lay in Tu Tieu, the one who dared to confront the unknown. The stranger advanced deliberately, dragging out the distance like a predator savoring the inevitable collapse of its prey. Each step struck the ground with a dry echo, fusing with the long howl of the wind, filling the air with a chilling oppression. Tu Tieu clenched her hand, nails piercing her skin. Inside, fear surged, yet intertwined with a strange, rising strength. She knew the decisive moment had come. One misstep, one faltering blink, and everything would collapse into a pit of no return. Her eyes suddenly blazed, a flicker of fire in the overwhelming night. Though danger towered before her, Tu Tieu was ready to step forward, ready to meet head-on the hidden trap that had just revealed itself. The air thickened, pressed down as if the world itself was suffocating. Tu Tieu stood motionless, her body strung tight like a bowstring ready to snap. Ahead, the stranger tilted his head, eyes glowing with the cold hunger of a beast, an unblinking gaze both frigid and bloodthirsty. Trang clutched at her clothes, her trembling hands drained of color. She wanted to scream, but her throat locked, choking on silence. All she could hear was the furious pounding of her heart, each beat like a drum of war. Helplessness tore through her soul, binding her deeper in the grip of fear that gnawed at her every nerve. The stranger halted suddenly. In the suffocating stillness, his lips curled into a faint, icy smile, as though the outcome was already sealed. His shadow stretched long and merciless, engulfing the two fragile figures cornered into the dark. Tu Tieu drew a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes flashing with a fragile yet unyielding light. In her mind, fleeting visions surged. Trang's pale face, years of solitude, and the irretrievable losses that scarred her. All of it fused into a force that forbade her retreat. She took a small step forward, frail in appearance, yet cutting through the darkness like a blade. It was the moment she embraced the razor's edge between life and death, where only a single chance remained. A chance to trade despair for survival. Time seemed to freeze, every vein in Tu Tieu's body straining as if ready to burst. Darkness wrapped around them, broken only by a dim shaft of light spilling through a small window, sharpening the hard lines of her face. Ahead, the stranger lunged forward, swift and brutal, like a merciless strike of fate. Trang panicked, her legs giving way as she collapsed onto the cold ground. Terror surged through her, paralyzing every thought, leaving her gaze locked on Tu Tieu, the only lifeline amidst the raging storm of death. Every shred of hope condensed into that fragile figure, standing as the last barrier against despair. Tu Tieu twisted sharply, her tentative step transforming into an act of defiance. Strength drawn from pain, from loss, and from an unyielding will to protect burst forth. Each movement carried with it recklessness, finality, and the raw force of sacrifice. In that instant, the line between fear and courage vanished. The confined space erupted with a violent clash, the sound sharp and jarring, tearing the silence apart. Trang held her breath, eyes wide, as Tu Tieu's figure rose against the dim backdrop, frail yet defiant, fragile yet radiant in defiance. Deep within, though the ending remained unknown, this moment marked a turning point. No longer was Tu Tieu running. She was confronting, no longer a victim, but a bearer of hope, choosing to carve light into the heart of darkness.